Russian MiG-31 aircraft, which are known to be capable of carrying the hypersonic Kinzhal missile, well familiar to Ukrainians, today violated Estonian airspace and remained there for a whole 12 minutes. This is already the fourth violation of Estonian airspace by Russian military aviation recently. But for the first time, aircraft heading toward the Estonian capital Tallinn stayed in Estonian airspace for so long. And that is why such actions by the Russian armed forces can be called not even a provocation, but another attempt to cross the West's red lines. The Estonian Foreign Minister, Margus Tsahkna, described this intrusion precisely in those terms, stressing its unprecedented nature. Italian F-35 fighter jets, which are on duty in Estonian airspace, were scrambled to intercept the guests from Russian territory. It should come as no surprise that Russian provocations against NATO member states continue. After all, following the drone attack on Poland, Washington took a position that, to put it mildly, raises questions. If on the first day after this attack, the American president, Donald Trump, could still talk about some mistakes connected with the penetration of unmanned aerial vehicles from Russia into the airspace of a NATO member state. Now, when drone debris has been found near Gdansk and even on the shores of the Gulf of Riga, it is absolutely clear that Russian drones were deliberately directed into Polish airspace. However, Donald Trump continues to insist, as he said in his latest interview to the conservative Fox News channel, that the appearance of drones from the Russian Federation in Polish airspace is supposedly due to the fact that they were previously attacked by Ukrainian forces, which thus changed their flight trajectory. The most telling phrase of the American president is, "Let's hope so." That is, Trump, as before, is looking for excuses not to respond to Russian President Putin's open provocations against the allies of the United States. And I don't know what there is more of in the American president's position: sympathy for the foreign policy goals of the Russian president, which seems to outweigh even his obligations to NATO allies, or genuine and uncontrollable fear of Putin, who has learned to manipulate Trump's emotions and use them for his own benefit. And of course, when Putin crossed yet another red line and encountered complete impunity from NATO, as well as demonstrative indifference from Trump and key members of his administration, such as Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who is still waiting for the results of an investigation, he went further. And this further is today's 12 minutes of Russian combat aircraft in Estonian airspace. I am convinced this will not be the last Russian provocation, and European NATO members in the Trump era will have to face much bolder actions from the Russian political leadership, which is confident in the political impotence of the American administration. Of course, Estonia has always been considered one of the countries that Russia's political leadership could view as a target for provocation and even attack. There has been talk of the possibility of a hybrid war against Estonia, when Moscow might use the presence of the Russian population in its border regions to organize the appearance of so-called sabotage groups. In reality, as we know from the experience of Slavyansk and Kramatorsk, these are just regular employees of the Federal Security Service of the Russian Federation, whose task is to prepare the ground for the arrival of regular Russian troops and cooperation with local collaborators willing to serve any hostile authority. But, as we can see, such open provocations have not happened yet. Although, to be honest, Russia continues to prepare the ground for such activity. And this can already be observed in the rhetoric and behaviour of some regional politicians of the Narva region. For Russia today, the main goal is to intimidate Europeans. The appearance of drones in the airspace of Poland and Romania, as well as the brazen behavior of Russian pilots in Estonian airspace. All this is an attempt to instill fear in European countries. First, to push them to take measures that would reduce military aid to Ukraine, with which Putin continues to wage war, hoping that this war of attrition will eventually bring him the desired triumph and the disappearance of the state hostile to him and his compatriots from the political map of the world. Second, to seek opportunities to establish its own political influence in European countries, particularly in Central Europe and the Baltics. In these countries, even now, one can see far-right politicians oriented both toward Putin and toward Trump, using social networks to manipulate public opinion. These populist politicians rely on fear of Russia and on Trump's indifference to Putin's brazenness to come to power in their countries and form governments ready for special partnerships with the Russian Federation and an understanding of its political and economic goals. This is already happening, for example, in Hungary under Viktor Orban's government, or in Slovakia under Robert Fico's leadership. The creation of a whole series of such governments is one of Putin's most important tasks for the coming years. He hopes that, frightened by the flights of warplanes or the appearance of drones in their own skies, Europeans will inevitably vote for constructive politicians, willing to collaborate with the far-right Russian regime. At the same time, the American far-right will of course applaud such an unexpected alliance and will hardly interfere with people. Agreeing with Putin's ambitions will simultaneously utter pleasant compliments toward Donald Trump or whoever replaces the already aging American president in the White House, in order to advance the interests of American far-right conservatives.